What's going on? This is SDG Labs. My name is Anastasio Dalde. Let's do some math! Alright, so what I'm going to do right now is going to do a problem where this dude shoots a basketball. Maybe not shoots a basketball, let's say throw a rock. And so I'm going to take the pen off this cap and I'm going to pretend I'm this dude and I'm standing on top of a bridge. I think the bridge was 24 feet high. And I take the thing and I kick it off like this. Oops, that was way too high. Give me a second. There we go. Shooting it off again. Boop, there we go. And it kind of went in this parabola-esque almost way. In fact, that equation right here is described by this. Let's see, x, this will be h. Actually, I'm going to change that x. It's not going to be x, it's going to be time. So the height as a function of time looks like that. If I were to graph that equation, I would have h of t is equal to negative 16t squared plus, I think it was 40? Yeah. 40t plus 24. Now, remember, this equation we've given to you, we've just said the equation for this graph right here is actually this. And technically, to be honest with you, that graph is actually described like this, where this up here is 24 feet. 24. And then, you know, you can go higher than 24 and below 24 or whatever. But the equation, or the graph for this parabola over here looks like this. And it goes on forever that way, and it goes on forever that way. I didn't pull this equation out of my and throw it up on the board. Actually, technically I did, but since I'm the physics teacher as well, I'll describe for you what it is in context. See this number right here? This tells me the height at which this person was standing at time equals 0. Because if you plug in t equals 0, you have 0, 0 over here, you got 24. So it's saying at time is 0, the height was 24. That's where that 24 comes from. See this negative 16 right here? This negative 16 actually comes from gravity. In the measurement of gravity is actually negative 32 feet per second squared. And I think that maybe some of you know it as negative 9.8 meters per second squared. But the value that we put out here whenever we're describing it in a physics context when throwing balls and whatnot is we take half of this. So since it's a negative 16, I know that they're measuring everything in feet. In fact, here's a question for you. Why negative? Why is it negative 32 and negative 9.8? Because it's pointing down. All right. This 40 right here, that comes from the velocity at which this person was throwing it at. So here's what my question for you is. That's what the entire, if I were to plug this into a graphing calculator, I would see this. But my question for you is, in context, where does the domain not exist? Give me a single number for which the domain does not exist. Now, I forgot to give you some numbers. This is 1, 2, 3. That doesn't look very even. This is 1, 2, 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 4 seconds would be out here, 5 seconds, and so on and so forth. So, what I'm asking is, where's the domain? What is allowed to come in? What are you allowed to ask me? What t values are you allowed to ask me? And I can tell you what the height is. Well, I can't tell you what the height is at 4 seconds. I mean, if I plugged in 4 into this equation right here, I could calculate it out for you if you wanted to. That would be negative 16 times 4 squared, which would be 16. That's going to be a big negative number. Plus 40 times 4, well, that big negative number is going to be bigger than that, so it's still going to be negative. Plus 24, I'm still thinking that negative 16 times 16 is bigger than those ones. So your answer is going to be negative, which we can see inside the graph. If we look at this thing, if I continue this thing on forever, you know, down that way, it's probably going to be way down here. But at this point, I mean, in terms of like the physical principles of what this is describing, this thing hit the ground at 3 seconds. So anytime after that, it doesn't really make sense in context. Similarly, I could technically tell you where that ball is at negative 1 second. It looked like it's kind of low to the ground. But the problem that we're having here at that point right there is that it's not There's no such thing as negative time. So as far as the domain for this problem right here, I would say the domain is all raw numbers. But in terms of context, what is the domain in context? Well, I would say, okay, fine. Your domain has to be t such that it's between 0 and 3. And I got that 3 just by looking at the graph. All right, let's switch it up. Let's pretend that this dude threw the ball a little bit faster. Or a rock, or whatever. So if he threw the ball a little bit faster, let's go with h of t is equal to negative 16t squared plus 50t plus 24. Now notice it's pretty similar to what I had before. The only difference being that it is that I changed this number, and the reason being is because I told you he threw it faster. So that would be reminiscent of what being thrown faster is. And you know what? To be honest with you, I don't like this thing in my face. So I'm gonna draw the graph over here. The old graph looked like this. The new graph is probably going to look like that. It's going to go higher. It's going to go higher, and it's going to be in the air for a little bit longer, so it's going to end up, kind of hanging out. It's over there. The question is, what is your new domain in context? Well, really to figure that out, what you need to do is you need to make sure that you figure out where this thing equals 0. So if I set this equation as 0, negative 16t squared plus 50t plus 24 equals 0, I can solve for that. And I could use the handy dandy quadratic equation. I could factor it if I knew how to do that. Yeah, that's all you do. So let's just solve it. I'm going to divide everything by 2, and so I've got negative 8t squared plus 25t plus 12 equals 0. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to, I'm going to try factoring that, but to be honest with you, I don't really want to factor that. That 8 right there is really killing me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the quadratic equation. Quadratic equation, if this were A, this were B, and this were C, where A is negative 8, B is 25, and C is 12, then there's this negative boy, plus I'm unsure about going to a radical party. Dude was kind of a square, and so he missed out on talking to 4 awesome chicks, and the party was over at 2 a.m. Essentially, I'm plugging that into my equation, so I have negative 25 plus or minus the radical of 25 squared, which is 625, minus 4 awesome chicks, so that would be 4 times negative 8 times 12. Now notice how I put those parentheses around those guys right there, because I need to remember that that's times. If I didn't put the parentheses, I would read this as 4 minus 8 times 12. So that helps me out. See this negative over here, that negative over here, those cancel it out and everyone's happy, so we've got positives all around. Divide that whole thing by 2a, and a is negative 8, so that would be divided by negative 16. Let's do some head calculations here. That would be negative 25 plus or minus the square root of 625. Let's see, 4 times 8 times 12 is 384. Divided by negative 16. Negative 25 plus or minus the square root of 1009 over negative 16. Square root of 1009 is 31.76, I think it is. Yeah, 31.76. So this would be negative 25 plus or minus 31.76 divided by negative 16. So now I take the positive version and the negative version. All right, so negative 25 plus 31.76 divided by negative 16. If you calculate that out in your head, you end up getting negative 0.4225, which I'm just going to make it as 4.42. Negative 25 minus 31.76, because there's 2 answers. You take care of the positive, now we take care of the negative. That's equal to let's see, negative, that would be negative 56, yeah. 56.76. Negative 16. Hopefully that didn't come off the area, or the camera right there. And that's going to give you positive 3.55, yeah. So this is telling me that h is equal to 0 at 3.55 seconds or negative 0.42 seconds. All right, whoop-de-doo, great, good job. But my domain for this excludes all negative numbers, because that's kind of the one we talked about previously. There's no such thing as negative time, so therefore you wouldn't consider that negative time part. So your domain for this is t such that t, well, I guess I would have to put the lower bound first. It would go to 0 is less than or equal to t, which is less than or equal to 3.55 seconds. Because after 3.55 seconds, the darn thing hit the ground, so therefore I don't really care about a time for after that. That's outside of my domain. It doesn't exist in my mind as to what I need. Yeah, that's about it. Got any questions, shoot me an email, or actually drop it in the comments box. Shoots, bro. Up out.